While it may feel like the BYU football season just began, it is officially the midway point of the regular season for the Cougars. How are things looking right now? Well, pretty good by their ranking, obviously the 6-0 record, but let's break down in letter grades how things look at the midway point.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. And of course, a big thank you to all of you who we like to call everydayers right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel, of course, has got great offers for you all the time, but right now, place your first $5 bet and you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, let's dive right in on today's show, and we officially have made it to the midway point of the season. It's crazy to think. I'm serious about this when I say this. I cannot believe we are in mid-October. We've played 6 games, speaking of watching BYU football, and we have 6 regular season games to go. All things considered, it's been a marvelous season for the BYU football program. I don't mean to take anything away from what we're about to do, but at the midway point, as I often like to do with this podcast, we're going to hand out some letter grades. Now, I'm going to go position group by position group, but I actually threw it out to our Locked On Cougars Insider group. If you're not a member, just a shameless plug to join us today. But I threw it out there and said, I want your guys' grades in terms of the offense, defense, and special teams. So we'll get to the overall look at that momentarily, but I want to start off here. On offense for the BYU football program, things are going well. They're not going fantastic. They're not going okay. I think they're going well. And what I mean by that is the BYU offense, in many respects, has not even hit top gear this season for the BYU football program. If it ever gets to that point, and there's a question mark if it will, but there's also an opportunity that it could. And if it does, I'm telling you, this BYU team gets even more dangerous than they already are, and they're pretty darn dangerous as it stands currently. My letter grade, starting off with obviously the most popular position in Provo, Utah, is the quarterbacks. I would give Jake Retzlaff a solid A-. Everything considered, what he has done for BYU this season is absolutely masterful. He has guided them to a 6-0 record. He has carried the offensive load for large stretches of this first half of the season, both rushing and passing. And all he has done is win football games. It's incredible to think this guy was 0-4 as a starter a season ago, and now he's 6-0 this season. He got a 6-4 career record, and we have finally, crazily enough, reached the double digits career starts mark for him. How much better can this young man become? Well, it sure feels like we're going to learn a lot in the next 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games this season, depending on how far the BYU Cougars can take this season. And then I'm fully expecting him to return as the incumbent next year for the Cougars. And at that point, how much better can he get? But I do think right now, I don't think I can give anything lower than an A- to Jake Retzlaff. On to the running backs, his backfield running mates out there. I would give the running backs a solid C. It's nothing against them because injuries have hampered their availability. And we talk about it often on this podcast that the best ability is availability. And when you're not available, well, guess what? You can't accomplish what I think many of us want to see from these BYU running backs. So the hope is that the meter is up, and by the end of the season, when we do postseason grades, they'll be able to say the running backs, man, they had a great back half of the season. But right now, I really feel like it's almost, I want to say incomplete, but I'm going to decide a letter grade of a C, maybe a C+ at most. But I want to see more from these running backs in the back half of the season because I talked about it. If we want BYU football to be at peak efficiency on offense, the running game's got to really come alive. It showed some really nice signs of life on Saturday against Arizona. Can they follow that up with a good performance this Friday against Oklahoma State in the wet, cold, miserable conditions it's expected to be? Here's hoping, because that would take a lot of the load off a guy like Jake Retzlaff having to worry about slinging that ball that's going to be wet, etc. And we'll see how they handle that. At the wide receiver position, I give them a solid B+. I think that both Darius Lassiter and Chase Roberts, they are bona fide stars out there for the Cougars, and I really like what I'm seeing from them. And I kind of went back and forth saying, do I want to give them an A-? Do I want to give them a B+? I just feel the fact that the load has been really kind of borne by those two. When you consider they had their top 6 pass catchers back from a season ago, I was expecting more from guys like a Keelan Marion. Cody Epps has been out due to injury of late, but he's been really ineffective, quite honestly, so far this season. I also expected more from guys like Parker Kingston seems to be coming along just fine, but JoJo Phillips and the like. So I'd give the offense at wide receiver a B plus. Offensive line. Oh, excuse me. I don't want to gloss over the tight ends. Now the tight end position, it's kind of been at times invisible. And I get a lot of those complaints from you guys when it comes to our social media, as well as our YouTube comments saying, Jake, why does BYU not target the tight end more? I wish I had a good answer for you. And I hope to get a straight answer at some point from Aaron Roderick or anybody who has more of the knowledge of why it's not been that way. But as it stands, I would give BYU's tight ends probably that B minus territory. Maybe, we'll go B minus. We'll be kind. I want to see more from the tight ends. There's a lot of talent in that room. You got 2 legitimate 4-star prospects in Reiner Swanson and Jackson Bowers. You got a lot of other contributors who have played a lot of football. Ethan Erickson, Mata Avataase. Who else am I thinking of? Ray Paulo. Also have Keanu Hill, who's made the move from wide receiver to tight end. I want to see more from the tight ends, much like I want to see more from the running backs in the back half of this season. That brings us to the offensive line. The offensive line, compared to what I expected going into this season, I give them a solid B plus. I really think that this offensive line has shown flashes of being more of that dominant force that BYU had their offensive lines be in front of guys like Zach Wilson and Jaron Hall. It fell off hard, and that's a reason why they made a change at that position, speaking of the coaching, with TJ Woods. He has come in and really revolutionized how this unit is operating. Injuries have hampered, I believe, their output because Connor Pay on the shelf, at times Sonny Makassini, as well as Austin Leusa have been on the shelf. That's not helped BYU to get the consistency or the continuity I would like to see from BYU's offensive line. So I think a B plus is in order here because relative to expectations, I think they've outperformed them, but there is still a ways that they can climb. So if you aggregate all those grades together, Jake, what are you going to give BYU's offense in the first half of the season? I'm going to give them a solid B. I think that there is a lot of room to improve, but I think they've done enough. That's probably the term that they've been. I talked about the offense doing well. I think they've done enough to get BYU to 6-0, but there is another level or extra levels that BYU's offense can reach this season. And if they do that, be a really, really fun back half of the season because we're talking about a BYU team that's right in the thick of things as the Big 12 race really heats up now. They're 3-0 in conference. They have already surpassed their win totals for conference play and overall wins from 2023. Remember, they're 6-0. They're 3-0 in conference. They had 5 total wins last year and 2 conference wins. So things are looking up for the Cougars. And can they keep the dreams alive of going to Arlington in early December come the back half of the season? I think BYU's offense is going to play a major part, as it always does, but more importantly than anything else, the offense will determine, I think, how far this BYU team can go in their final 6 regular season games. All right, grades for the defense. Also, the special teams, we'll dig into that next. We'll let you know what I think of what has been a pretty marvelous campaign so far on that side of the football. We'll delve into that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Roy. Of course, Cougar fans, it is time to recognize our Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we've pooled over $10,000 to help support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With the Roy app, you can directly support the athletes that you love, ensuring all funds get to the specific player that you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support and your money is going to with our friends at Roy, and you even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. That's how these athletes get paid. The best part is it's risk-free. If the athlete transfers or doesn't deliver on the content requested, you get your money back. This week, I am supporting a guy who made his career history. That's Tanner Wall. Got his first career interception against Arizona. Really spearheaded a turnaround for BYU in that game and got them rolling with that interception. I just pitched in $100 to Tanner Wall's account. I'd love for you guys to join me. Even $10 makes a difference. Let's show Tanner Wall the love and keep him connected to our school. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow. tomorrow. Your support sets your team up for success. Take advantage today. Check out Roy's new exciting giveaway. 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download Roy, the app, create an account, enter the referral code Locked On, and you'll be entered to win. Simple as that. Already on Roy, any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you entered automatically. No purchase necessary, and of course, it's void where prohibited. Download Roy today and join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_return_on-you for more information. It's all courtesy of friends over at Roy. Support the players and change the game. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. If you want all the latest when it comes to college football, check out our friends over the Locked On College Football podcast. Spencer McLaughlin's doing a great job covering the sport from the national view. Yeah, it's the national view. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. Also available on YouTube, and of course, Locked On College Football, just like us, as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right, more grades. BYU's defensive grades. I talked about BYU's offense performing well in the first half of the season. Compared to the offense, the defense has just been off the charts. Come on. This was a defense that was sub 100 in so many major categories last year that I was like, man, any improvement. Any improvement would be a massive shift in my mindset regarding this BYU defense. What they have been is just absolutely dominant. I have loved watching what Jay Hill has done in a very, very short time and transforming this defense into a juggernaut. Teams do not like playing against BYU defensively right now. They'll turn you over. They're going to hit you hard. I think evidence of that. Remember that hit Tyler Batty laid on Noah Fafita late in that game against Arizona. Fafita got up, his helmet was all kind of askew, and you could kind of tell he's like, man, I've taken a lot of abuse in this game. 14 quarterback hits alone in that game. This BYU defense is going to make you feel them. That's the one thing I can assure Cougar fans of. So, grades. I would say on the defensive line, I'm going to use the defensive line as a whole. I thought about splitting up between the tackles and the ends, but I feel like I'd just go with an aggregate there with regards to the defensive line as a unit. It has surpassed all of my expectations. I give the defensive line a solid A-. I really have been impressed because those of you who are longtime everyday listeners right here on the podcast know how concerned I was with the fact that BYU essentially ran it back with the defensive linemen they had on the roster. That defensive line last year got absolutely manhandled by opposing Big 12 teams. This year, they are taking the fight to those offensive lines, and it's been very, very impressive to see because, once again, it's essentially the same guys that they ran it back with. And I was like, man, you can't really run it back with that same group of guys and expect different results. Well, the insanity is me because thinking I was going to be able to change that. They have absolutely delivered. I think an A- is in order for BYU's defensive line. Let's talk about the linebackers. BYU's linebackers, even more so than the defensive line, have proven to be much better than they were a season ago. Last year, it was essentially Ben Bywater and friends at the linebacker position. He was so good early on in the season, but when he went down, we saw this defense essentially fall apart. It was because there wasn't anybody that could really step up and be that guy to replace Ben and really lead the troops in his stead. This year, BYU's got 4 or 5, maybe even 6 linebackers who are contributing at an extremely high level. I'm going to give them a letter grade of A. I think the linebacking core has been absolutely remarkable. Everything we have seen from Isaiah Glasker indicates he's a future star, if not an outright star right now. Harrison Taggart has stepped into that middle linebacker spot and made it his own. He has a number of other high-level athletes who would love to take that position away from him. He's kind of just stiff-armed them out of the way and said, no, this is my gig. And then Jack Kelly. We all thought Jack Kelly was going to be good, but really this good? Can we really think that he has been remarkable for this BYU defense? And that's just the top 3 linebackers on this roster. I'm also thinking of guys like Siale Acera. I'm thinking of guys even down the depth chart a little bit like Ace Kafusi. Man, the Moa brothers, Sione as well as Ice Moa. They have been absolutely incredible in their own right. So the depth and talent in the linebacker spot indicates to me that BYU did a really good job getting these guys coached up. Got Justin Enna as the linebackers coach. He's got to take a little bit of the credit, obviously, because he got these guys engaged, focused on what they need to do to improve, and they absolutely have delivered on that. So I give an A+, or I'll give an A+ to the linebackers. If you count A+, I don't know. I think it's a very, very remarkable thing what we've seen from them on the back end. Not the back end, but the front 7, on the back end of the front 7. I'm making a convoluted mess of all of this, but into the defensive secondary. Cornerbacks. I really like what BYU has delivered with the cornerback unit. Gennaro Guilford remains, much like Kelly Papinga, a highly underrated coach. All he does is develop talent, deploy it on the field, and gets results. Jacob Robinson is performing at an all Big 12 caliber level. I've loved what I've seen from Evan Johnson, Maury Bamba. I like what Mark Collins has brought since he transferred in from Weber State. The nice part is, even with guys like Micah Harper stepping into that nickel role at times, they have not missed a beat, even with some injuries hitting the position group here and there. I think the corners have obviously got to get an A themselves. I think they've been very, very solid on the back end. I know some of you are going to argue with me on this, saying, well, they've given up too many third downs. Yes, they need to be better about getting out of third downs and forcing more punts. I get all that, but I'm looking at it just from the expectation I had for this unit as relative to what they are doing at midseason. And this defense is absolutely balling out. So I got an A for BYU when it comes to their corners. Now at safety, the safeties are remarkable because think about it. BYU's two starting safeties right now are two walk-ons. Tanner Wall, who we just talked about with our friends at Roy, as well as Crew Wakely. Neither one of them were, I think, expected by anybody, unless you listen to this podcast, to be a starter this season. I was telling you guys, keep an eye on Tanner Wall, keep an eye on Crew Wakely. All they do is make plays, and that's what Jay Hill craves from his safety unit. Those two have held down the fort. They have got other talented players who are high-level athletes, Raider DeMooney, Falatau Satuala, Tommy Prasis, on down the list of guys who've got more star ratings and fans than you can count behind them, but all they do is continue to play at an extremely high level. I don't think the safety play has been elite, but I would give it a solid A-. I really do think that those two, speaking of Tanner Wall and Crew Wakely, they've delivered time and time again. And so long as they continue to deliver in the way that they have, nobody's taking that job away from them. I don't care what anybody tries to do. They have to outplay two guys who have been really, really in sync with one another all season long. And sure looks like it's going to be tough to unseat either one of them unless it is due to injury. That's the only thing that really feels like can knock these guys off their perch. But I've really, really been impressed with BYU safety unit. So overall grade for BYU on defense. I gave them A- or A's across the board. I will give it an A-. Are there things that can be improved? Yes, I do think that the third down issue, especially against a team like Arizona. Remember, Arizona came into that game 14th in the country, 14th in the conference, 14th in the conference, averaging just a shade over 31% on their third down conversions. BYU gave up north of 51.7% of conversions in that game. Not good enough. Was it 57%? It was way too high. There are things that still need to be worked on. I know that Jay Hill is never satisfied with how his defense is performing, but once again, relative to expectations going into the season, I think this defense has been an absolute force. It's the chief reason why I believe BYU is 6-0. I know the offense, the special teams have to play their role, but the defense, they have been the linchpin that has gotten BYU to this point. And then quickly on the special teams front, I think it's been a very, very good campaign so far. You got a punt return for a touchdown. Yes, it came out of an absolutely maybe scary situation. You have a kick return for a touchdown. You've discovered a punter who is pinpoint accurate in Sam Vanderhaar. I continue to think that Will Farron is a very, very solid, if not spectacular. I would give BYU special teams a B+. There are still more to do in the return game. There's more to do in terms of the net punt average. Will Farron can be just a touch more accurate at times. I feel like he pushes kicks a little bit too often for my liking, but I think I'll give him a B+ in special teams. And the consensus, by the way, across our Locked On Cougars Insider group, for the most part, is that the offense got anywhere from a B- to an A-. That was kind of the range I saw most people have the offense. Defense, it was an A- to A+. I'm kind of right in line with what I was thinking. And then on special teams, that's where we got a little more of a skewed thing. I saw some as low as a C on special teams and as high as an A+. So a little bit more of a range on special teams, whatever your flavor is, what you like about special teams or what you don't like, that can change your grades. But that's where I stand. So I've given BYU a solid B on offense, an A- on defense, and a B+ on special teams. What do you think? Am I up in the night? Did I nail it? Or do I need to adjust my expectations? But the back half of the season will teach us a lot, it feels like, about all three of these units and their individual position groups within them, because if they deliver all three phases of the game, continue to play that complementary football that Kalani Sitake talks so often about, the good times are going to keep rolling for BYU. So long as they continue to do that, there's no reason to think that the Cougars are going to fall off in any way, shape, or form. And that should excite you as a Cougar fan. All right, coming up here in just a minute, we're going to talk about BYU basketball. Were they ranked in the top 25 preseason poll? Well, I'll just spoil the surprise. They were not, but there's a bigger storyline than just BYU not being ranked when it comes to this upcoming basketball season, and we'll get to that momentarily right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys no matter what you're into when it comes to your sports betting needs. You like betting on basketball, football, baseball, hockey, no matter what you're into, even like tiddlywinks, cricket, whatever you got the bug for. FanDuel's here for you guys. They are America's #1 sportsbook. And of course, you can start this season with a big return with our friends on FanDuel. Right now, when you get the hunch in the middle of a game, you can go check out the latest stats, view some live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. So you make it all in one stop to stay apprised of everything going on. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's $200 bonus bets guaranteed. All you got to do is place your first $5 bet with our friends over at FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com today to get started. That's FanDuel.com and take advantage of this incredible offer. It's all courtesy of your friends over at FanDuel, as they are America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. If you have not done so already, another shameless plug to join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Get the inside scoop on all things BYU sports. I'm hearing, have one-on-one chats with me via text. It's a great way to interact with the show and also support the show at the same time. You get a 14-day free trial. Click the hyperlink in the show notes below and join us today. Also, if you're interested, you can vote in different things we do. I mentioned the fact that I threw it out to our Locked On Cougars Insider Group to have their letter grades worked in on the podcast. We reserve that right for all of our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. You want to be a part of that? Join us today. All right, before we go on today's show, the Big 12 was decently represented in the top 25 preseason poll. I wouldn't say it's a great representation considering, for whatever reason, it baffles me to no end. 9 SEC teams are ranked in the preseason top 25 poll. Excuse me. The SEC, come again. We talked about the SEC bias existing in college football, but it exists in college basketball as well. I'm a bit baffled by this. I look at this and say, how in the world did 9 SEC teams get ranked in the AP Top 25? Now, I mentioned the fact that BYU is not ranked in the preseason Top 25. That's just a simple fact of life. The Cougars are among others receiving votes in this, but you have Kansas, Alabama, UConn, Houston, Iowa State as your top 5. So 3 Big 12 teams in the top 5. Then you extend that a little bit further. You've got 2 more Big 12 teams in the top 10. Okay, that means 5 of the 6 teams that are ranked in this preseason poll are in the top 10. The only one that's still that's outside of that is number 20 at Cincinnati. How in the world do you go past all these Big 12 teams? And I'm not just trying to stump for BYU. How do you go past the entirety of the rest of the Big 12 and say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to rank Ole Miss. I'm going to rank Florida. Come on now. I'm not trying to be a homer here for the Big 12. Maybe I am. No, I am. Screw the SEC. I can't stand the fact that the SEC's got 9 teams in this league. If you were to ask me the best basketball leagues in the country, the SEC is a solid 4th place for me. I would go number 1, Big 12, number 2, Big East, number 3, ACC. Oh, and then maybe the SEC, maybe the Big 10. That's how far down the list I have them. And how in the world do they get 9 teams ranked in this? I don't get it. I will make a bold prediction right now on October 15th. So we're October 15th. Let's say come March 15th. That should be around when the NCAA tournament is gearing up to be played. So we're about 5 months away from that. 5 months from now, I will make a bold declaration right now. I will say this. 5 months from now, there will be more Big 12 teams ranked at the end of the season than there are SEC teams. And if they don't, I'll eat crow in some form or fashion. I don't know. Suggest something I should do if I'm wrong about that. But I think that they got this wrong, speaking of the national pollsters. And like I said, I'm not trying to stump for BYU to be in the preseason poll. Quite frankly, I'm actually happy BYU's not in that preseason poll. Receiving votes is good enough for me. I talked about it last week on the podcast when the preseason poll came out for the Big 12 that BYU was picked 9th in. That's a great spot to be in because, once again, relative to expectations, you can still overachieve, but at the same time, if you finish in the middle of the pack in the Big 12, that's still going to find you in the NCAA tournament. I think there are going to be at least 10 teams from the Big 12 in the Big Dance next March. And that's why I'm telling you right now, I think that the Big 12 is going to have more ranked teams at the end of the season than they do right now in the preseason poll. The SEC could make me eat my words, and great. If they do, so be it. But I really, really believe in the Big 12. Could it cannibalize itself? Could it be that there's so much parity in the league that the records don't replicate in terms of the national pollster saying, hey, I need to reward that team by ranking them in my top 25? Yes, that could be in play, but come on now. 9 SEC teams? Are you kidding me? That league is not. The SEC doesn't really care about basketball. The only reason they have a high-level basketball is because they got to spend some money on something other than football at points. Think about it. Alabama for so long has invested so heavily in football that finally like, oh yeah, basketball. Hey, Nate Oates, you're a good coach. Come coach for us. And that's just a microcosm of it. Who would pick Ole Miss over any of these teams that aren't ranked in the Big 12? If you think I'm wrong about this, I welcome your feedback. But I really think the national rankings got this wrong, because I just look at it and say, how in the world did the SEC get that much representation? The crazy thing about it is Texas Tech is the 4th team out in the preseason polls in terms of the others receiving votes. BYU's got 14 overall votes. And then you also continue to look through this. St. Mary's is out there, Wisconsin, Louisville. Like, there's just not that much representation for the Big 12. I don't get it. Do you think the Big 12 is more top heavy than we're anticipating it being? Maybe so, but I just don't understand how you can bypass some of these Big 12 teams in favor of some of these SEC teams. Maybe you're just simply looking at last year's record saying, okay, I'm projecting forward on this, because we all know how transient the transfer portal has made college basketball and the one and done situation, and how much talent exchanges hands every single year in that realm. But I do think that it's just doesn't sit right with me that the Big 12 got kind of shafted on that. I do know that they have the second most represented conference out there, so that's a positive. But come on now. To have 3 more teams from the SEC beat out the Big 12 in the national rankings, I don't believe it. But once again, it's a good spot for BYU to be in, because they're already getting some attention, obviously, with the polls, some of the pollsters having them ranked in their rankings. But you're sitting 9th in the preseason poll. You're out just outside the top 25. There's still everything. I mean, everything to play for if you're Kevin Young in the BYU basketball program. This is a team, remember, that was picked second to last in the league last year and finished 5th, tied with Big Bad Kansas. It's incredible to consider how well they did last season. And the nice part is this year, they still got that opportunity to go and quote unquote shock the world, because you can still move up from 9th and shock the world. You can still be outside the top 25 when the season begins, and end up ranked inside of it at the end of the year, and still have the nation saying, wow, what did BYU do? What's the storyline going on in Provo, Utah? Well, this year it's going to be Kevin Young and the high level talent he brought in after it felt like BYU may have to take a step back with Mark Pope exiting to head to Kentucky. By the way, if you're tracking it, Kentucky was ranked, albeit 23rd. Bit low for Big Blue Nation over there. 191 overall votes, just in front of Ole Miss. So they're one of the 9 representing out of the SEC. But that's not going to sit well with BBN, Big Blue Nation, down there in Lexington. They're going to expect Mark Pope to very much overperform and get much higher in the rankings than that ranking overall. So there you go. I just think I really do think they got it wrong. But hey, once again, I will be happy to eat crow if I'm wrong about that, but I am that bullish on the Big 12 this year. I do think it could cannibalize itself. You look at the KenPom ratings that also came out today. The Big 12 is well represented. I think there were 7 teams in the top 25 for KenPom. BYU's not in that top 25, but they're not too far away. So there's some good things rolling for BYU here, but at the same time, there is still a great opportunity to go out there and show people what you're made of. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm actually going to pull this up right now. Although they are in the top 25. I apologize. I screwed up on that. BYU in the beginning of the season rankings from KenPom, they are 21st. So there you go. They are in the top 25, just behind Villanova and St. John's out of the Big East. Just in front of them, a few spots is Cincinnati. KenPom has got Houston, Duke, Auburn, Alabama, Connecticut, Kansas, Connecticut, UConn, Kansas, Iowa State, Arizona, Gonzaga, and Purdue as his top 10. So a good representation in the Big 12 there. But BYU is much higher in KenPom's ratings than they are in the top 25 rankings. So still a lot to play for, and it should be a fun season ahead. I don't want to wish away college football, but there's a part of me that wants to get to college basketball season just to get a look at what Kevin Young has got cooked up with these Cougars, because I think it could be a really, really fun year. All right, that's where we will leave it for today. A big thank you as always for your guys' support, and appreciate all of the interaction you guys offer on a daily basis. We have seen major growth with the podcast for the first half of this football season. May the second half be just as good to all of us, I'm including you out there, as BYU makes another run, hopefully in the back half of the season. But as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. And until tomorrow, everybody, have a great rest of your day, and thank you for being everydayers right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.